Welcome back. Part 2 of Chapter 6. What are you doing? You some kind of thief or something? He asked. Then he and Rodney moved into the crowd, waiting by the door. Daryl knew that the other kids had seen what happened, but none were willing to stick up for him. Those are my clothes, Daryl said. Following behind Tyree, many of the kids standing by the door turned to look at Daryl. A few started laughing and making snorting noises. Tyree managed to squeeze himself into the front of the crowd nearest the door. Daryl could see his clothes under Tyree's arms. Then the bell rang. Within minutes, the entire locker room cleared out, and Daryl found himself completely alone. The only clothes he had were the t-shirt and shorts he was wearing. I don't want to walk home this way, Daryl thought. He knew it would end up passing Tyree and his friends on the way home from school, and then they would laugh as soon as they saw him. Daryl sat down on a bench in front of his locker. He wanted to wait until the hallways were empty so fewer people would see him in his gym clothes. Just then, he heard a door open, and Mr. Dooling walked in. "What's the matter with you, Mercer?" Mr. Dooling asked. "Why aren't you dressed?" Daryl hesitated for a minute. He was too embarrassed to admit the truth. "I guess somebody picked up my clothes by mistake," he said. "I can't find them." Mr. Dooling shook his head. "Well, you can't stay here. See if you can find something to wear in this basket. Then get going," he said, handing him a basket filled with musty clothes that students had left in the locker room and never claimed. Daryl rummaged through the basket and found a pair of jeans that fit him. After changing, he went to his locker, picked up his books he needed, and headed out of the school. In a dumpster along the side of the building, he saw his clothes. They were covered with orange peels and ice cream sandwich wrappers. Daryl felt as if his head would explode. He could not take this anymore. He wanted to scream. Instead, he yanked his dirty clothes out of the dumpster and walked home. Daryl was grateful his mother was not home when he got there. It gave him time to dump his dirty clothes into the washer without her asking questions. Then he went to his room, hid the jeans he took from the gym under his bed, and did more push-ups. I can't keep running away from Tyree, he thought. He knew that Tyree would corner him sooner or later, and he knew the next time it would be worse. The only solution he could think of was to give Tyree his lunch money. I don't want to give him my mom's money, he thought. But what choice do I have? Daryl figured out how much money he could spare. If he did not buy any drinks at lunch, he could give Tyree 50 cents a day. Would that be enough to stop him? That evening, when his mother came home, Daryl pretended to be doing homework. He could not face her knowing that he was going to give her hard-earned dollars to a kid he hated. He did not want her to know what a weak, frightened boy her son really was. The next morning, Daryl walked on the main street to Blueford. He knew Tyree would confront him, but at least it would happen when he expected it. Although he hated the idea of giving Tyree money, he was tired of being terrorized in school, and he just wanted to put an end to it as soon as possible. Daryl was not surprised when he spotted Tyree and his friends standing near the supermarket. "Oh, look who it is," Rodney said, watching Daryl approach. "There's the punk who's been hiding from me," Tyree said. "Boy, you better have some money for me, 'cause I've lost all my patience with you." He walked over to Daryl and stared down into his face. "What you got, fool?" he asked. "Me and my mom don't have much money," Daryl whimpered. "I can give you 50 cents a day." 50 cents? Rodney and Tyree laughed. Daryl cringed. "Boy, you're going to have to do better than that. I can't even buy a soda with that." "You give me the $2 you pay for lunch every day, you hear? That's cheap enough for you and your poor mama," Tyree said, pushing his chest against Daryl's. Daryl fumed inside. No one had the right to call his mother poor, even if it was true. "But I won't be able to eat lunch," Daryl said. I need money to eat." "Boy, if you mess with me, you won't have teeth You won't have teeth left to eat anything, Tyree yelled, grabbing Daryl by the top of his shirt. Now listen up. You meet me here every Friday morning. You give me $10, and Rodney and me will be a little nicer to you. If you forget to pay one time, I'll bust you in half. If you tell anyone about this, I'll put your skinny butt in a cast. You got that? Daryl nodded. I'll see you here on Friday, Daryl Mercer. You and my money, Tyree said with a smirk. Then he and Rodney slapped hands and started laughing. Daryl went on to school. He never felt worse about himself. He had always been picked on, but never in his life did he pay someone to leave him alone. Daryl wondered what Malik would say if he knew what he was doing. In English, Tyree went to his desk in the front of the room without bothering Daryl. Only once did he look back. This time, instead of threatening Daryl, Tyree rubbed his fingers together as if he were holding money. Like doing like that. Then he mouthed the word, Friday, without making a sound. Daryl knew what he meant. Tyree was warning him not to forget. Tyree and Daryl, do you have something to share with the class? Mr. Mitchell asked suddenly, surprising Daryl. Daryl shook his head. I don't think Daryl should have to share with anyone. Just look at how little he is. He needs to keep everything for himself, Tyree said, acting sincere and innocent. The class chuckled at his comment. Daryl wanted to hide under his desk. He just sat there motionless. Tyree, if you have any other helpful comments, you are welcome to share them with me after school today, Mr. Mitchell said dryly. Sorry, sir, Tyree said, turning around to face the chalkboard. After class, as Daryl gathered his books, Mr. Mitchell approached him. Daryl, is everything all right? You seem like you have a lot on your mind. I'm still getting used to it here. It's a lot different from Philly, Daryl said. Look, Daryl, I know what it's like to be in a new high school. It's not easy. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm right here. You know where you can find me. Thanks, Daryl replied mechanically. Daryl knew Mr. Mitchell was trying to help, but he could not bring himself to talk to the teacher. Back home, Daryl and his friends made it a rule never to bring adults into their problems, especially teachers. Now, Daryl wasn't so sure. Thanks again, he said, and he left Mr. Mitchell's classroom. On Friday morning, Daryl headed to the supermarket parking lot with $10. The 4-block walk from home felt like the longest walk he had ever taken. Each step required great effort, as if his feet were made of concrete. Even the money in his pockets felt uncomfortably heavy, and every muscle in his legs and back felt slow and achy. It was as if his body was quietly protesting what he was doing. Daryl knew that paying Tyree was wrong. The shame and guilt that he felt for giving his mother's money to a bully swept over him in unending waves. What kept going was the hope that Tyree and Rodney would stop hurting him, that he would be able to walk through Blueford without feeling threatened. God, I feel so bad for Daryl. It's just, this must be just so awful. A few minutes after I'm sorry, there's a part of the page that's like scratched away. After a few minutes, the supermarket parking lot, Daryl spotted Tyree and Rodney coming towards him. Tyree led the way. He was smoking a cigarette. Both boys eyed Daryl as they approached. What you got for me, little man? Tyree asked. He threw his cigarette down and walked directly in front of Daryl and blew a cloud of smoke in his face. The smoke stung Daryl's eyes and caused him to cough for a few seconds. Tyree smirked. Then Rodney mumbled something, and the boys chuckled Quickly, Darryl reached into his pocket and pulled out 6 $1 bills and a handful of change. When they saw the change, Tyree and Rodney looked at each other and started laughing. "That boy must have robbed his mama's piggy bank to pay us," Tyree said between fits of laughter. Darryl looked down in shame. Because he had spent some of his mother's money earlier in the week on lunch, he only had $6 to give Tyree, and to make up for what he had spent, Darryl had taken money from his old change jar. He barely had enough coins to add up the remaining $4. Tyree took the money from his hands. "Darryl Mercer, you are the sorriest punk in all of Blueford. Ain't no one else there who's as small and dumb and poor as you." The words were like sharp knives. Darryl knew they were true. He opened and closed his eyes to hold back tears. He could feel Tyree and Rodney looking at him and judging him. "Mommy, the kids are being mean to me again. Nobody likes me here. I think I'm gonna cry," Tyree whined. "Ooh, I'm so mad at him. He's just such a jerk. And Darryl's such a nice kid. Oh." His voice was high-pitched and raspy, like the sound of a screeching brakes on an old city bus. As he spoke, Tyree twisted his face into a look of mock sadness and pretended to sob uncontrollably. Rodney howled in laughter. Then both boys slapped hands and turned back towards Darryl. A crooked smile spread across Tyree's face. Oh, Darryl hated them. He hated the power they had over him. He hated that they knew what hurt him most. But more than anything else at this moment, Darryl hated that smirk on Tyree's face. It was vicious, ripping through Darryl as sharply as any insult. Through Tyree, Darryl saw how pathetic he was to the rest of the world. He saw something else, too. Something that frightened Darryl as much as it had enraged him. In Tyree's gleaming eyes, Darryl saw the bully's pleasure in humiliating him. Tyree's smirk made Darryl want to crawl into a hole and never see another person again. "Next time, I want dollar bills, not change. You hear me?" Tyree said, poking his finger forcefully into Darryl's chest. "Or else you'll be swallowing your own teeth," he threatened. Darryl nodded. He could not look into Tyree's face. The shame hung on him like a weight tied to his chin, forcing his head down and his eyes stare at the ground. Silently, Darryl turned around and walked towards Blueford. Behind him, he heard Tyree and Rodney resume their laughter. At one point, Darryl thought he heard Rodney say, "Stupid fool." He did not turn back. With each day that passed at Blueford, Darryl hoped things would get better, but they never changed. Every day, he lived with the fear of Tyree and the shame of paying him. The stress took its toll on his schoolwork. Darryl could not concentrate on anything, and his grades reflected it. Even in subjects he once got B's in, Darryl was now getting C's. But grades were just part of his problem. In school, Darryl could not look into the eyes of his peers. He was not sure most kids at Blueford knew he was giving away his mother's money and feared they would all laugh at him, just as Tyree did on Friday. He wondered if anyone else from Blueford was watching when Tyree grabbed the money from him and gloated. The second time Darryl paid him, Tyree forced him away with a violent shove. Darryl left the parking lot quickly, hoping no one would see him. But he was sure someone did, and they must have told the rest of the school. "Girls must know what I'm doing," he said to himself. "That's why they won't even look at me." The only girl at Blueford who Darryl had really talked to was Amber Lynn, but she even seemed to speak to him less. She must know too, he thought. He figured she did not want to talk to a coward. The only other person at Blueford Darryl really knew was Harold. But one day Harold was sick and missed school, and Darryl sat at lunch alone again. Darryl knew he had to do something. He needed to do it soon. At home, things were not much better. His mother, caught up in her new job, never questioned Daryl. And when he told her school was fine, she did not seem to notice that Daryl was packing lunches either. He wondered if she noticed how quickly the peanut butter and jelly disappeared. One time she asked him if his appetite had increased. "Yeah, Mom," he said, "I'm hungry all the time." He could not tell her the truth, that he was bringing lunch to school and saving her money for Friday payment to the bully. "You know what it means when your appetite increases, Daryl?" she asked. "It means you're getting your growth spurt. Soon you'll look like your Uncle Jason." Daryl was glad she was happy, but he felt guilty allowing her to believe such a lie. "Oh, you have no idea what's happening to me," he thought as she smiled at him, but he said nothing. Daryl knew that now, more than ever, he was completely alone. That is when he decided to take up Mr. Mitchell's offer. He knew the English teacher might have forgotten or not meant what he said, but Daryl did not know what else to do. The more he thought about Tyree and his own slipping grades, the more he realized he had to speak to someone. On the last school day before Thanksgiving weekend, Daryl headed for Mr. Mitchell's classroom. Daryl had just left class, his last class, and was moving quickly, eager to catch Mr. Mitchell before he left. He was grateful to find the teacher at his desk. "Mr. Mitchell," Daryl said, "you got a minute?" "Yeah, sure, Daryl," Mr. Mitchell said. "Have a seat." That's the end of chapter 6, okay? I know that's really tough to, I think it's really tough to read and to hear that, Daryl's being bullied so badly, and that, it's the words that Tyree says that makes it even just worse, you know what I mean? He's just really crushing Daryl's spirits and making him think less about himself, which is really the most awful part. So, but I want you to keep in mind why we're reading this. That yes, it's called The Bully, but let's remember the book is not so much about Tyree, but it's going to be about Daryl and what he does about it. He's already started, right? He's made that step to talk to Mr. Mitchell. It's not so much to tattle on Tyree. He needs solutions. He needs some help figuring out what to do. And so that's what we're going to be looking for. And that's what we're going to, from this point on, we're going to watch and look for all the different ways that Daryl is going to fight back, fight for himself and be proud of himself. Okay? All right, guys. See you soon.